I'd like to welcome you today to our study in the parables. We're going to look at two small parables today. They're twin parables. One's called the parable of the mustard seed, and the other's the parable of the yeast. Both of them answer a question, which is this: why is what we're doing, if it is God's kingdom and his plan and his work, why is it having so little of an influence? And why is it so hidden and not changing the whole world? Just a little background. Israel was an out-of-the-way place. It was not a good place like for the great superpower Rome to go. If you were a Roman governor who had to serve in Jerusalem, you would think you were sentenced there, not receiving an honor to serve there. And then beyond Jerusalem, there was the area of Galilee where Jesus spent most of his ministry, and that was viewed as like Hicksville. In fact, Nathanael put it like this. He said, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" That was his reference to Jesus' hometown. And so Israel was a out-of-the-way place, and Galilee was more out of the way than an out-of-the-way country, Israel. Jesus' followers walked with him. Their lives were changed, but they didn't see much happening around him. Add to that what Jesus said about his ministry. He said, if anyone seeks to save his life, he's going to lose it. But if anyone loses his life for my sake in the Gospels, he'll save it. Jesus not only taught that, he lived it. And so his life was one of losing, not one of gaining. If you're following a guy like that, you're not going to get on the cover of a magazine. You're not going to get notoriety. You're not going to get invited to a banquet. You're not going to have prestige and power, but rather you're going to be with him, obscure, out of the way, doing small things. He spent most of his ministry with people like tax collectors and sinners and zealots. All of those people were not favored by society. The people that came to his ministry were the sick and the lame and the demonized. They were not the people that, again, society would lift up, but rather they were the dirty, they were the outcasts. So if you're with him, you're saying, well, what are we doing? How's this coming along? How's this working? I'm trying to put myself in the scene. I hope you would think likewise. So Jesus told us some parables to help put perspective on that. So the parable of the mustard seed sounds like this. He said, the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that someone took and sowed in the field. It's the smallest of all the seeds. And when it's grown, it's become the greatest of all the shrubs and becomes a tree so that the birds come and they make their nest in it. That's found in Matthew chapter 13. You also can find it in Mark chapter 4. We're looking at the Matthew 13 passage. Now, mustard seed's really small. In fact, it looks like a tiny piece of dirt. You know, you have to know it's a seed to know it's not dirt. But when you put it in the ground, it grows quickly. It becomes almost 10 feet tall. And it has big branches at the bottom, and birds literally come and they make their nest there. Now, Jesus used this to talk about the kingdom and the mustard seed. Okay, he could say, we're in obscurity. We're a bunch of nobodies. It doesn't look like we're doing much. I know your life has been changed by me, but you're looking at Israel, and overall Israel's kind of a mess. I want you to know it's growing, and it's going to become big. It's going to make a difference. Hang on. Now, that's spreading language for that, but you kind of get the gist. Well, what about its twin parable, the parable of the yeast? Here's the parable of the yeast. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed it with 3 measures of flour until it was all leavened. Again, Matthew chapter 13, that's verse 33. Some of you may have eaten my wife's bread. She makes great sourdough bread. What you might not know is I'm the one that helped her get started doing that. We were living in another town. She was working at the hospital, and I'd been running, and I'd read about how bread would make you run better. So I decided on a day off, I'd make some bread. Wow, it was awful. Looked like a brick. You would need a chainsaw to cut it. I think if you'd taken it as a brick and laid it up in a wall of a house, it'd still be there today. What did I do wrong? I messed up the yeast. Tony got the yeast right. Now, you can't see yeast. You don't find yeast. You just see the effect of yeast. And that was the point of Jesus. We may be in Galilee, Jesus was telling his followers. We may be a bunch of nobodies. We may be hidden, but we're going to make a difference. You think about it. Hospitals, healthcare, workers who go to foreign countries and they provide aid and relief, obviously churches. all of this is the result of a hidden work of people who gave themselves. They sacrificed themselves. They sacrificed their notoriety. They got involved in God's kingdom, and he was able to grow a tree, the great tree, the mustard from the mustard seed, or to produce something that changed and permeated all of the world. So we thank God for that. What I'd like you to do is think with me and make a list of people who are like the small seed or the invisible yeast, but they make a big difference. I made a list. I'd like you to add to it, but here's some thoughts, okay? They're mothers who pray daily for a long time, so effectively for their families. They make a difference. They're the aid workers I talked about who go to countries and they provide sanitation or clean water, or they bring the gospel. They're making a huge difference. We'll never know their names till we get to heaven. They live sometimes without a name so they can have security purposes. They're the men and women who are reaching out to people in the area of addiction, and they use their time and their energy. I'm in awe of them, how they give and they care for folks. And again, they're nameless, they're faceless. They're not going to have their picture on the cover of a magazine or in the news, but they're making an important contribution. People who just go to work every day. They quietly do their job and they serve at their workplace in the name of Jesus. And then there are parents who nurture their kids. How valuable that is, what they're doing with their children. And obviously churches. There are churches who serve, and again, they're not the big and the giant. They're in neighborhoods and communities, but they serve and they make a difference. So with that being said, I'd like you to be encouraged. We're living in very chaotic and difficult times. And you probably wonder, am I going to make a difference? Is Christianity making a difference right now in what's going on in the world? These two parables tell us in the midst of discouragement, obscurity, and smallness, God is at work in his kingdom, and he is moving his kingdom to his purposes. So be encouraged. Thank you for being a part today. I pray that God blesses you a lot. Got a prayer request, send me an email, bsprad49@gmail, private message me on Facebook. We'll pray for you. We'll have a prayer team at Maywood to do it. God bless you. Have a great day.